we've got a session which is just about walking. I'm going to be co-chairing with Selene Saxby. She'll be along shortly. She's trying to get in on the statement, the COVID statement with the Health Secretary right now. And as soon as she does get to ask her question, she'll come in. I hope you can hear me. Apparently my microphone's been a bit dodgy, so I won't talk too much. Each of our speakers have got up to 10 minutes each. And first we've got Emma Griffin from Footways, which is a network of quiet and interesting streets for walking in London. So over to Emma.
Actually, I'm going to pass to Daniel first. We were going to, Daniel was set to go first, but I will come next.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Daniel Raven Ellison is from Slowways, and I've met his business partner, Darren, but I've not met Dan before. And Slowways, I think, is amazing, but it's basically an initiative to create a national network of walking routes, which connects all of Great Britain's towns and cities, as well as thousands of villages. And it really does use the power of smartphones, even when there's no signal. So over to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruth. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone this evening and to be sharing with you Slowways, this project that I started a couple of years ago in the height of the pandemic, really. But before I get started, I just want to say that you're going to hear from three sort of really different, but at the same time, very complementary initiatives this evening, all of which I think are at the forefront of innovation around how we can get people more active and walking in and about cities and between towns and cities in the country. And while we have separate initiatives, the three of us, between Footways and Go Jauntily and Slowways, we'd like you to imagine how they can all come together actually as absolutely outstanding innovative work from here in Great Britain. And also imagine how, what if we were to create somewhere in the country a test bed where we could bring together our three initiatives and others to really catalyze walking in maybe a particular town or region or valley somewhere in the country. So just start imagining that as I go through this. So I'm going to take you on a very quick dive through Slowways. So I'm just going to share my screen. So my background, I am a geographer, a National Geographic explorer. I'm a former geography teacher, and I'm really interested in how we think about places and how we can create new connections in the landscape, in our minds, and in our ideas. And that's where Slowways really comes from. And when we think about the country, I think that we can really think of lots of different ways to get more people walking more often, further, and for more purposes, which is really the central mission of what Slowways is all about. And just to say that off the back of this initiative, we've set up a not-for-profit community interest company that has been supported by the National Lottery Community Fund. And that's the sort of ethos through which we're going forward with this. So when we think about Great Britain, many of us expect to be able to get around the country using our national road network, and we expect that to be fairly easy to understand and navigate. You don't expect to have a Duke of Edinburgh award or a GCSE in geography to get yourself on the roads from London to Glasgow or wherever you're going. And we equally expect there to be an easily understandable national rail network that's also easy for us to navigate to get around the country. We do have an expectation around a national cycle network, but that national cycle network is really designed for cyclists, and it's predominantly on road. And as you can see from this map from Sustrans here, it's fairly fragmented as well. And while we do have about 100,000 kilometres of public rights of way for walking across Great Britain, when I look at them, I don't think they're as easy to understand as those other networks. I begin to think when I look at this map from the Long Distance Walkers Association, it looks like a big pile of spaghetti on a plate. It's not necessarily that easy to get your head around if you're not got the qualifications. And even the names of some of the routes can be quite elusive as well. So I got thinking about that and got thinking about the primary destinations we have around the country, mapped out by both Ordnance Survey and the Department for Transport, and got imagining this network, a bit like the Romans did, around this principle that we should all, I think, be able to walk reasonably, directly, safely, enjoyably, accessibly between any two neighbouring settlements. And I think if you can't walk or wheel that journey reasonably, directly, safely, accessibly, then I think that maybe something's going wrong. we have that expectation for our roads and for driving, but in the advent of the car, to some extent, that ability has been lost. So I got playing around just on Google Maps with this sort of geometric network, and decided to sort of see if we could develop this idea further. So organised a hack day at Geovation, which is Ordnance Survey's Innovation Centre in central London, and 70 people from across Great Britain came together and started playing around with this idea, creating walking routes on OS maps that were as far as possible were safe, lawful, accessible, direct, off-road, had resting places where you could eat or sleep every 5 to 10 kilometres, use public transport, and be relatively easy to navigate as well. So not just thinking about this as a recreational network, but one that's highly functional about getting people from the places where they are to where they want to be. Crucially as well, creating routes which are enjoyable and maybe use established routes. But, you know, places like Milton Keynes weren't around when some of the most historic routes were being made in the country. So it's about thinking about where we need new paths and new routes as much as thinking about those established ways. So I had planned to have lots of people coming together to create these routes, as you can see here, following this methodology we created for Slowways. And as you can see, going from Sonning Common over to Henley and then Henley over to Maidenhead, in reality, these routes wiggle through the landscape following that methodology. Now, that day went really well, and I had expected to travel around the country across 12 different regions to organize more hack days to create this national network of walking routes. But then COVID hit last March. Suddenly we were stuck indoors. And while I thought the project was going to grind to a halt, a whole load of volunteers from that first hack day got together and put together giant Google Sheets and Google Maps and Zoom events to train up 700 volunteers to help us from their living rooms, their kitchens, wherever they were during that first lockdown, in their frustrations of being captive indoors, not being allowed outside, to get online, to collaborate, to create this national network of walking routes. And compared to that first sketch I showed you of this sort of geometric network, we worked together to create this network of what we call slowways that connect up all the towns and cities in the country, the 1,000 most populated places, and lots of the strategically most important villages around the country as well. And this is what it looks like up in Scotland. So in practice, these lines are wiggling through the landscape. And as you can see here, going from Hay-on-Wye to Hereford down towards Gloucester, because we're curating the best possible routes, we make it easier for people to imagine how they might walk to neighbouring settlements or around inside settlements as well, using the power of this visualization here. And just as a user case for you, at the moment, if you went onto a typical algorithm website and tried to search a route from Swansea over to Norwich, for example, we know that Google may not necessarily show you the best way for walking. They might show you a good cycle route, a good road route, or a good public transport route, but not for walking. But what if we could show people a series of segments that they could use to walk from Swansea to Norwich, or from Bracknell to Slough, or from Huddersfield to York, wherever they're going to. But we know enough data and information about each of these routes that we know if they are accessible by wheelchair, whether they are suitable for a pug-sized dog or a St. Bernard-sized dog, whether there's accommodation at each of the nodes, which is for less than £50 a night, making this sort of long-distance walking far more affordable for people, whether it's thinking about recreational or functional purposes. So in this way, Slowways disrupts people's thinking about how they might move around the country in a way that is highly enjoyable, memorable, and has all the kickbacks we're aware of in terms of being low carbon or zero carbon, super healthy, and driving people out, not just to the top of Snowdon, but to explore different parts of the country and spending their pound at the same time. So phase one was all about creating a first draft and a provocation to inspire people to get involved. And this is a map of what was created by 700 volunteers, connecting 2,500 primary destinations. They created 7,000 routes that stretch for 100,000 kilometers, which is the equivalent of walking around the planet, I think 2.5 times. And they invested a year's worth of volunteering in a single month to create this national walking network. And it's not just about connecting up all the towns and cities. This map here just shows you how it connects up all the national landscapes across the country as well. So phase two of the initiative, which is being supported by the National Lottery Community Fund through the Growing Great Ideas Fund over the next 7 years, is all about inspiring people to get out and walk and review these routes so we can establish them in people's hearts, minds, imaginations, and infrastructure, both of the mind and landscape in the country. And people can do this by coming to the Slow Ways website, searching for anywhere, any town or city in the country. So here, Middlesbrough, for example, then they can see all the routes connecting Middlesbrough up to Redcar and Stockton and all the neighboring places. And then they can then jump in to see route options for these particular places. So actually here between Lancaster and Conforth, you can see there's actually several route options. And the idea here is that different route options are better for different people. So some people might have slightly gammy knees and want to miss out as many styles as possible. Some people might be slightly happier walking alongside an A road if it means that they're going to get to their destination more quickly. And other people might be afraid of walking down a canal at night or that kind of thing. So different route options for different people's user needs and desires, and they can be rated and ranked. And what we're looking for is for enough people in the country to review every Slow Ways walking route at least 3 times as a peer review, so it can become a verified route. And in terms of the scale of that challenge, that's the equivalent of collectively walking to the moon. It's about 300,000 kilometers of collective walking to achieve that. And when people come into the website looking here at Derby over to Borough, what people are doing is they're reviewing the routes to say how appropriate they are for different users with different needs, suggesting better routes if they are aware of better routes, but doing this in an extremely grassroots way, but in a way that provides really high quality data that can not only be used by Slow Ways, but there's no reason why Hannah with Go Jauntily couldn't include the routes where she is. And when we release the routes through Creative Commons, for more people to be able to use the routes, there's no reason why Citymapper or Google couldn't use them for their own navigation as well. So rather than trusting on just algorithms, we're trusting actually on people who have walked these routes before, and you know that you can trust them and follow in their footsteps. And the system we have here as well, there's nothing stopping Emma from Footways from thinking about the way that Footways can join up these nodes within urban areas as well. So where we are now, a few months after launch, is there's now 8,000 routes in the network that stretch for 117,000 kilometers. Incredibly, our volunteers have already walked 33,000 kilometers of routes, which is only about 7,000 kilometers shy of a circumnavigation of the planet if they've done that. There's lots of route reviews, and we're working towards getting all of these routes fully verified. Lots of people are also leaving surveys, and these surveys are really detailed, where some people are taking a photograph, literally every sort of segment of a route, so that people with different user needs can see the quality of routes and whether they're appropriate for them or not, as well as providing that high quality data for us. So I can't wait for you to hear my other colleagues from other organizations speak on their initiatives in a moment, but I'd love for everyone watching this to dive into our website, have a look around, and consider walking and reviewing a route. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks ever so much. That's really interesting. Could I just remind everybody, if you've got questions which you're going to pick up all together at the end, could you please put them in the Q&A and not the chat? So if you have put any in the chat, could you copy and cut and paste them and put them in the Q&A section? Thank you. Okay, so now we're going on to Emma Griffiths from Footways. Quiet and interesting streets for walking in London. Over to you, Emma.
Hello, thanks everyone. It really is a delight to be here to talk about walking and have such a great focus on 3 kind of really great walking initiatives and how we could potentially walk together. So I'm the co-founder of Footways. I'm also a volunteer campaigner with London Living Streets and member of one of the trustees of the Foundation for Integrated Transport. So just generally a active travel advocate. So I'm going to share my screen. Wish me luck on this. Let's hope this works. Okay, and let's go back to the beginning. Okay. So Footways. In a nutshell, our philosophy is for enjoyable everyday walking. If walking is easy and enticing, we think it's more likely to become a habit. Walking is, I guess, the one form of transport where you can really enjoy your environment. So therefore, make the most of that and pick the nicest routes. So in London, we pick London's most interesting, which actually were often it's most historic routes, its older streets for walking, leaving the more recent Victorian and Edwardian streets for the through traffic that they were designed for. And as with slowways, the idea is to get people walking more and further. And I guess I don't really need to sell the benefits too much here of the benefits of walking. We all know this, especially in this group. It's the most lowest carbon form of transport, low pollution. It's essentially a miracle drug in terms of, its impacts on heart disease, dementia, cholesterol, and everything, you name it. It's also easy, and I think something that we really want to bring out, and it's reliable. And actually in urban areas, it's actually sometimes the most efficient form of transport. Some of our routes in central London are about the same time as a ride on public transport once you've done the walk to the Freeman station, and the same in a taxi, sometimes often quicker than a taxi. We were actually challenged by some taxi riders. There was a question sent to the Mayor of London to challenge our calculations of taxi rides, but walking often can be quicker. And even if it is a couple of minutes longer, you arrive feeling a lot better, in a much better mood, and probably have done a bit of work on the way, arriving prepared for where you want to go. So this is a classic footways route. The network has been meticulously designed to be both interesting and direct. And it's took David and Harrison and I a long time developing this and making sure it's as efficient as possible. And this is a kind of perfect example of Monmouth Street in Covent Garden. This shows it's not just about green routes, although green routes are important, as Hannah will go on to explain later, but it's also about architecture. It's also about people. It's about life, the life and soul of the city. These are the things that make walking really enjoyable. It's also about infrastructure. At the bare minimum, we need the crossings in the right places, and we need green man on junctions. We need wide footways, even footways, dropped curbs where they are. But we also need pedestrian priority, which has been so successfully created here in Camden by Camden Council. They've removed through traffic from Seven Dials and Monmouth Street here, and as a result, people have taken over. This is a beautiful route from Trafalgar Square to British Museum if you're next time anyone's in central London, and it is about as the same time as a trip on another form of transport, so I highly recommend it. So our vision then is a people-friendly city. I'd quite like to go a bit further and call it a post-car city or a car-free city. We're not saying cars don't have any place in cities in the future, but we want to kind of turn things on its head. So people are on top and not the cars. And we all know that actually walking is at the top of many transport road user hierarchies, including the highway code more recently. But in reality, it's cars that get most space and most attention and quite a lot of money, really. Well, pretty much most money. So we want to kind of shift that, put people back on top, and then we can start thinking about the infrastructure that this form of transport really needs. So David Harrison and I, who's a retired House of Commons clerk and actually was clerk of the Transport and Environment Committee 20 years ago, was part of an influential report on walking back then. We started this project as volunteers with London Living Streets. We were funded by Transport for London to produce a beautiful map designed by Urban Good. That was published last September, and it was in high demand. We worked very closely on this project actually with a range of organisations who are all on our advisory board, including all the councils in central London, business improvement districts, developers, cultural institutions, including the British Museum and the Exhibition Road Cultural Group, Sustrans, Ramblers, Living Streets. It was a huge collaborative effort putting this together. The maps went there's a few, very, very few left, but they were in high demand, bookshops saying there was nothing else like it. Our map, basic map done with really, really actually no budget at all on Google My Maps has been viewed, I think, 870,000 times and counting. Go and have a look at it on Footways London. We're about to improve that. So we can see that there is a big demand for what we've been doing. And actually, one thing I didn't say earlier was that, as with Slowways, we are kind of offering a different version of the Google Maps version of routing. The Google Maps version sends you down the quickest routes, and often then you don't get to enjoy the nice bits. So our backstreet routes are in opposition to the kind of Google Maps, even City Mapper approach. So where we are next, Footways Central London Footways 2, our maps are almost gone, and we want to redesign and reprint them, and we're going to be working with Applied behind Legible London. We're in the process of seeking funding partners. Network Rail, LNER and Argent have signed up so far, which is extremely exciting for us. Network Rail see this as a project to talk about integrated transport or combo travel, extending one form of sustainable transport into another. When you get off a train, don't jump on a taxi or a tube, make that final stretch on foot, and therefore get all the additional benefits for our cities of doing so. They want to distribute our maps from all of their 11 London termini when we publish next spring, and also communicate these routes to passengers. Working with LNER, also interested in this, and about how when you're sat on the train on the landing page to get your Wi-Fi code, you find out about the walking routes when you arrive in London, so you can extend that journey. And we'll also be working on digital options. Mapbox want to get our routes on there, so we've got a much nicer digital version. And Go Jauntly is obviously a key partner for us in getting walks online with their great app. But then I guess it's what's next. I mean, Central London's where we started because there was just so much great potential there, and that's where we're based. We've already got routes in Islington and Hackney. We're volunteers in Haringey are plotting routes right now. Same in Waltham Forest. But I think by 2022, we should have a London-wide walking network that we can start playing around with and communicating. But I think there's even more potential beyond London. As we know, a quarter of car trips in England, that are under 2 miles that could be walked. So there's just a massive potential here, and using different innovations to communicate these digitally as well. We plan to work with local living streets groups to do this. I think these are a great ally for us to do this, because they know their local areas, and also they know the infrastructure that people walking need. So these routes can lead to change. So that as we move forward, I see 3 areas of interest that we really want to focus on. One is combo travel, and I just mentioned this with our collaboration with Network Rail, and maps and digital versions are one way of kind of connecting those 2 forms of transport together. But actually, it's a lot about infrastructure. I've got 2 pictures here of Oxford train station and Sheffield train station. I borrowed these pictures from Google Maps. One is quite common. Oxford is quite a common vision when you come out of a train station. It's a kind of car-dominated landscape, which does not say walk into the centre. It's a kind of immediate barrier. We want more of what we see here in Sheffield. Beautiful car-free or pedestrian priority avenues drawing you into the town on foot. This is about infrastructure, and linked to this is just accessible infrastructure on every footway. And this isn't just on the routes that we've got. This is important for all footways and across all towns and cities. This is we recently audited a walk with Transport for All. This is Waterloo to Covent Garden. It's a 20-minute walk. It should be ridiculously easy to make that on foot, and everyone should be really doing it. It's so easy, it's so quick, it's got beautiful views and beautiful architecture to see on the way. But actually at points, it's a complete nightmare for people on foot. And if you're in a wheelchair, I mean, really at points, it feels almost impossible, or if not impossible, just off-putting. And this is Katie Pennick here from Transport for All in her wheelchair, and this ridiculously tiny pavement going up to Waterloo Bridge. So as a bare minimum, we need to have the space for people walking, and we need to have even pavements, drop curbs, but we need to go further than that and also have the environment with less traffic. Thirdly, I think it's about collaboration, and we need to start kind of bringing walking together and seeing that this kind of ticks off so many boxes in terms of transport, in terms of health, in terms of our local economies, bringing people onto high streets. So we need to start kind of like a bit more of a kind of cross-sector, cross-departmental collaborative working on this to bring things together. We've been doing some work in Islington Council at the moment and working with the Cabinet Lead for Health there, looking at how we could use the tools such as PDFs and Google Flyovers and Go Jauntly, all these different tools to promote walking as a form of building exercise and therefore into your daily life and therefore health. Again, and I think Hannah will come on to talk about kind of tech in a minute, but also building web networks and testing them and then using them is a way for people to feel engaged in their local areas and get out on the streets. So Walking Innovation Testbed, I'm very excited about this, a kind of collaboration with organisations like Go Jauntly and Slow Ways. I think we've got something really exciting here. We pick a large UK town or small city, and we put all these tools in there and see what happens. And then crucially, we then get the data so we can then roll this out to wider towns and cities. There's all sorts of different tools we can use in terms of signage on streets and in terms of digital mapping on your phone. But we just need to start gathering data about how it works so we know what to do in the future and roll it out elsewhere. I think that's about it. I don't know if I've gone over my 10 minutes, but please get in touch. And if anyone wants to come and walk a route in London, we'll be delighted to take you on one of our beautiful backstreet routes and show how the wayfinding is way better than Google Maps, and you'll arrive happy. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you for your enthusiasm. So I'll now move quickly on to our last speaker, Hannah Such, and she's from Go Jauntily, which is a free community-based walking app where, I've lost my briefing, but Hannah will explain more about what Go Jauntily is. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I hope you're all doing well and you can hang around for a bit longer because we've got some stuff to share. So I'm one of the co-founders at Go Jauntily. We're a health and wellness company, and we made an award-winning walking, wayfinding and nature connection app. Go Jauntily was really born out of the frustration of not being able to find nice places to go for a walk. And we wanted to try and help break down some of the barriers to walking and promote sort of micro adventures on foot. As we've heard from some of the other excellent speakers today, we're living in an age of crisis as well, and many of which have been sort of exacerbated by COVID. So everything from physical inactivity, poor mental health, we've got pollution, the climate crisis, and we're spending more time indoors than ever before, and our local high streets are suffering. Walking is actually one of the easiest ways to combat some of these crises that we face, but not enough is being done to attract new audiences to this pastime. So our platform is available for free on iOS and Android. And the idea behind the app is that it tailors to your location and it surfaces walks near you. So on screen, you can see a little bit of a demo. We're just going to cycle through a collection of really cool looking walks, and then we're going to swipe up and we're going to pick one, and then photo-led guides basically help you navigate. We point out things of interest. So it could be some interesting architecture. It could be the flora and fauna that you can see en route, and you can save it for later. We've had around 350,000 downloads, and in August we peaked at 40,000 monthly active users. So next up, I wanted to share some work that we did over lockdown. So we won some funding as part of the business response to COVID from Innovate UK and Sport England, and we created dynamic green routes. It's a bit like Waze, but for walking. The routes are especially designed for people and not cars, and we create the greenest routes from A to B. So it works currently in the UK and Ireland, but there is potential to roll it out across the world. You can pick a route and walk the leafiest, quietest, least polluted way there. So traditionally, Citymapper or Google Maps is probably a better example, would take you the fastest route. In this instance, we're taking you the greenest route. You can also enjoy 1 kilometre, 3 kilometre, 6 kilometre or more nature-filled walking routes from your door. And to create these routes, we've used a combination of local environmental data, things like street trees in London, pollution levels, proximity to green space, as well as the busyness of roads and also speed limits. And we give high priority to green elements, like the size of parks, and we try our best to avoid negative elements like busy roads. And a really cool thing is that it's all community driven as well. So you can upvote and downvote paths. We're starting to pull together a lot of really great anonymised data gathering from our green routes and our features, and we can start to see people's feedback on certain routes, and we're looking to extend that so that some of that data can be fed back into things like OpenStreetMaps, or even potentially with public sector organisations if they want updates on like the kind of the state of their paths or their routes. On the left-hand side, you can see how we start to calculate our routes and the greenness of it. Obviously, when you're going through Burgess Park, we have a high confidence that that's going to be tranquil and leafy. We have less confidence about how tranquil a route is going to be when you start to cross the Old Kent Road. But on the next screen, I'm just sharing some of the data and insights that we've been gathering over the last year and a bit. We share a lot of this with public sector organisations that we work with. So far, we've had 300,000 green routes walked in the last year, which is really exciting because it was launched as a business response to COVID. And our audience is around 56% female, 44% male. And in the last year, we've actually had a 550% increase in our female users. We've got a really consistent usage on the walking map all weeks, especially since we launched the green routes. So it's around 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. is the predominant time for walks, Monday to Friday. And at the weekend, we have massive peaks. So obviously people are like living for the weekend. Our average length of our walks is around 5 kilometers, about an hour's worth of walking. And 73% of people would recommend one of our walks to a friend. And we poll people before and after a walk, and people are 22% happier after taking one of our walks, which is quite good. That's definitely a metric that we're happy to share. So during lockdown, obviously things were very different for everybody. We actually can show you a 7-day average of London walks during the lockdown period. Basically, walking increased post-lockdown 1 and post-lockdown 3. I think that was November or January. I can't remember. It's all going into a blur. But the long and short of it is there's been sustained levels of walking, which is excellent. And then on the left-hand side, you can see a sort of screenshot of a heat map across London, and it shows where Go Jauntly walks are, where some of our Transport for London walks are. So we've got things like the Capital Ring, the London Loop on the app, and you can start to see where there are users using the app who are potentially using it in an underserved area. So this is going to give us like priority of where to create routes, where people are looking for routes and potentially can't find them. So that's exciting, and that is something that we can work on with all of our kind of local authorities that we're working with across the UK. So next up, I want to share our nature prescription. So engaging with nature and tuning into nature boosts your connection with the natural world. And this is really important because it isn't just about like nature in the Peak District or out in the rural areas. It's actually everyday nature. So things like street trees, bird song, a flower in someone's garden or in their window box. Tuning into those moments of nature can bring about clinically significant improvements to your mental well-being. This feature has been through 2 successful randomized control trials, and it has been shown that if you're suffering from a mental health difficulty, it can bring about clinically significant improvements. 1 week's use also has lasting benefits, and it's a really good tool that we're making available for social prescribing. So things like green prescriptions and things like that, which promote walking and nature connectedness, can really come to a fore. And we're working on it being the world's first app-based green prescription. It's really simple. Sorry, I've got a cold coming. It's really simple. You just take a picture and then you literally note down the good thing that you see, and it's as simple as that. Next up, I just want to share with you our feature that we made as in partnership with Portsmouth City Council, and it is to try and reduce the school run based traffic and congestion. So we worked with them to create a challenge that encouraged parents and kids to walk to school at least 3 times a week, or encourage them to ditch the car and get active. And as part of this project, we run 2 pilots with some 2 local schools, infant schools. And as part of it, every time the kids successfully walked a week, they would get a key ring. And the results are really, really positive. We had around 73% of pupils in one one school from reception year upwards sign up. 84% of the users agreed actually that the Stomp to School challenge encouraged active modes for travel, and 72% agreed that the school street that was brought out in line with this should become permanent. So that's starting to give the evidence base that actually parents, teachers, and children actually want some of this infrastructure to help reduce congestion and air pollution in and around their schools. We work with a variety of partners, everything from commercial brands to local authorities, and we digitize existing routes, we create new platforms and services, and it's really great to be able to have this opportunity to share this with you all, because I think, you know, walking is really important mode for transport. It's often underfunded, underserved, and it's about time that like organizations such as ourselves are able to kind of share all of the really cool, exciting things that we're doing. And this is my email address. If you wanted to get in touch to find out more, it would be great to talk to you if you do. And then if I may, I just wanted to try and wrap up and conclude what myself, Emma and Dan have sort of come here today to sort of share with you. I think we have hopefully seen the ingenuity and enterprise of UK founded walking innovations, and we're really excited about our future potential collaboration. We believe that in order to meet the ambitions that outlined in the gear change strategy, innovation is needed, especially if half of all urban journeys need to be cycled or walked. So in particular, some of the opportunities related to our future collaboration include things like accelerating the UK's innovative active travel and combo travel market. Note that walking for all of us includes things like practical walking and leisure purposes. We believe that we can help fast forward the decarbonising of transport and net zero in response to the climate crisis, as well as increasing the very real benefits, the very real health and wellness benefits associated with walking, and then also supporting local economies through the Walking Pound. And we really believe that we can help promote a global Britain by being a leading exporter of accessible active travel innovations and exciting solutions such as the ones that you've seen today. To do this, collaboration is king. We'd love to work with organisations across the UK, local government, Connected Places Catapult, to do rapid research and development trials, essentially creating a walking innovation testbed where we could either test a place or a type of journey and use this evidence base required to roll it out across the UK and worldwide. Thank you. That would be great to hear any thoughts or questions that you might have. I'll stop sharing.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Hannah, and for all three speakers. We've just doubled the number of questions in the Q&A, and also our co-chair, Selene Saxby, MP, has just managed to get away from the chamber. She must have been one of the last to get called by the speaker in the COVID statement. Hi, Selene. Sorry, I haven't seen two of the questions. Right, okay. So I'm going to slightly veer them because, Mike Walter has asked, what do we need to do to get walking into the sustainable travel debate? I think it's a really good question, and what needs to happen to give walking more of a push, apart from discussing walking at the All-Party Parliamentary Group on walking and cycling. So I'll go in the order you spoke in. So Dan, then Emma, then Hannah, and you don't have to answer all of the questions at any length or at all. Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick and just highlight maybe just an observation of an issue around this, that it seems to be that when it comes to the cycling lobby, where there's clearly lots of various, like very obvious direct investments that can be made either by individual citizens or by companies or by government around cycling, it seems to me that walking, the economics around it are a bit more indirect in people's imaginations, and so it seems to be the smaller sibling of the two. And I think that means that actually policymakers need to work harder to make sure that walking is front and center, especially considering the fact that it's often far more accessible for people to actually go and engage with. And I'd like to go further again there as well, particularly on the inclusivity agenda. and point out the fact that when it comes to organizations that are thinking about mobility and disabilities and access to the landscape, that really the questions that are being asked are quite often questions around, like, where do we know that all people can access of certain different mobility needs, and not where might you be able to get to if you have the right kit and the right wherewithal. And so the framing of the debate actually is quite often not just about, say, cycling versus walking, but all those people who have more specific user needs, that they're marginalized even further from the conversation still. And just to push further on it slightly, I think that there's a slight fragmentation maybe with the walking in terms of between Department for Transport in urban areas, DEFRA in the countryside, and then like who owns walking is also an issue. And the opportunity to cut across government may be by thinking about walking in a more interesting way as well. So there's a pile of things there, but I think that more work is needed to overcome those challenges.
Emma?
Yeah, but and following on from that, from what Dan's just said, I mean, maybe it's time for somebody in government that takes walking as a lead and then can tap into all these different kind of parts of government, so it is all connected, and see that it ticks so many boxes. Agree, and I think there's a sort of assumption for walking that everything's okay. People can see what the infrastructure for cycling needs. We were talking to LNO about this actually when we were discussing with them. They can see how they can do the integrated transport of cycling, you know, space for bikes on trains or parking for bikes at stations. When it comes to walking, it becomes a much harder thing to put together into mind. What do we need to be doing? So I think projects like ours that are just raising the profile, and I think a route network is very useful. It kind of focuses minds on where people are, then gets people thinking about that walking environment a bit more clearly. Then you do start to notice all the gaps and the errors and the kind of bits of kind of faulty infrastructure. So you can start focusing your mind, start making the case for it. It's amazing if you have a map, people suddenly start thinking differently about a city. It's as it always has been.
Shall I add just one? Yeah, I'll add one tiny thing. So echoing a lot of what Dan said, but in our experience, when we're working with local authorities, first of all, most of our funding comes through local authorities. So it doesn't come from higher up levels. So it gets kind of passed down from government through to local government. And what we found is that actually the budgets are sort of like quite small, quite squeezed, and coming from different pots. There's not like one central pot that's put aside for promoting walking or managing walking. And so that has been like a bit of a challenge, especially as a sort of self-funded app. But yeah, that's only my little input there.
Okay, I'm going to try and combine questions a little bit. So, and I'm going to go from the bottom up. I'll try not to forget the questions at the top. So from Adrian Lord, what are the top 3 types of infrastructure improvement that would help to choose walking, help people choose walking for all or part of their journey? And are you using, well, those of you who are collecting data, are you using any of the data to address barriers to positive experience that you can then use in terms of better infrastructure improvement? So I'll go backwards now. Hannah.
Yeah, so we're not necessarily feeding into infrastructure improvement yet, but we believe that our database of, our data can help influence some of those urban planning decisions in future. What I would say is that what we're finding is actually people are looking for like shorter city-based walks. Traditionally, walking has been something that potentially people feel like leisure routes, climbing up a mountain, hiking. But actually, people are looking for everyday walking adventures. So what we've done is we've curated lots of different types of walks in the app. So from step-free walks for those if you've got a wheelchair or a pram or something like that, to shorter walks or shorter alternatives, because not everyone can go on a 10k hike just off the bat of that. So that's how we're sort of like tailoring our data to suit our needs and our customers' needs. And
I think, Emma, you started listing some of the opposite of the barriers, actually. Yes, you did. Sorry, 3 types of infrastructure improvements. You actually listed some in your presentation. Any you want to add? And are you collecting data about where improvements could be made?
Yeah, the three type of infrastructure improvements are more space, and that space needs to be kind of accessible and even. And then you've got safe crossings. It's just the key thing. I mean, even in London, there are places outside train stations and museums where there are huge numbers of people crossing very busy roads with no green man. I mean, this can no longer, be tolerated. So safe crossings on desire lines where people need them. And then finally, which we really think most more, to improve the walking environment, you need less traffic. So you need to have a network, ideally, of low traffic car-free streets across all towns and cities. And I think that is actually entirely possible to do that. So walking is the natural option. We're not collecting data, and this data is needed. And I think this is why I think a kind of collaboration with organizations starting to gather data and then apply that to infrastructure improvement is where we need to be going next.
Dan.
Yeah, just 3 points on this. The first thing I think I'd say is that the Ramblers have a fantastic campaign around Don't Lose Your Way, which is all about protecting, footpaths that our ancestors have given us to make sure we have them for the future in terms of public rights of way. And clearly there might be power in the room to help us maybe extend the period in time we have to actually protect those footpaths from the past. And what's interesting about the data we're getting from Slowways is that we are seeing this principle that you should be able to walk reasonably directly between two places. But then we see the level of deviation people actually have to walk in order to miss out dangerous roads, private land. And quite often what you see is new suburban estates on the outside of towns and cities where it's just not safe to walk from one to the other. So I think our data is beginning to show where we might need new paths. So yes, we need to protect paths in the past, but actually we need new paths because then we have new sets of needs and new settlements as well. Secondly, really crucially, I touched on this before, that we are surveying routes in terms of levels of accessibility and different user needs for different places. And many of our volunteers are very interested, for example, in terms of personal safety on routes as well. And at the moment, I think there's the expectation when you go onto Google and you're driving somewhere that it'll tell you if the road's a bit gammy and you're going to find it a bit hard to get to a certain point. Well, actually, I think that we have the technology that all of us be able to work together across government, across governments, across different organizations to know where every single barrier is in the country that could disable someone from using a route, and where every single enabler is as well, and be very smart about that technology, but to share that project across everyone rather than where it is at the moment, where it's siloed in lots of different local government departments and lots of different organizations and not all together. And there's such an opportunity to do that. And that's not just about thinking about where people are at the moment about, well, where are the problems that need fixing? Actually, you don't necessarily need to fix the problem. Just tell me what the problem is and I can work out whether or not I can get past it or not. There are plenty of people who can get up mountains in wheelchairs as long as they know whether there's a stile in the way or not. Finally, and this is maybe contentious, I think that a lack of proper signage in the landscape excludes people from that landscape because they need to have their DAV award or something. When you're driving to Glasgow down the motorway, you have a sign there that tells you where to get off the motorway. Why do we have lots of roundels and signs throughout the landscape that name what the path is called, but not have a little arrow, a digital arrow telling you where you're walking towards? So if you're in a village or a town, you have that cultural, social invitation to explore the landscape and realize that you can walk it to save some money for your health, whatever else. I think the fact we don't have proper signage in the countryside is highly problematic in terms of being inclusive.
Excellent, thank you to all of you. I don't know whether these are questions or observations in the Q&A, but Dave Stroke Andy Holiday has asked about what I understand to be blue ribbons. We lost that 3 to 5 meter protected space along the rivers. What can be done to recover what's been lost? I mean, since the 80s or 90s, London has had a blue ribbon policy. So future developments have to recreate open public access along the river, even if it's been lost when new developments come up. So that does mean some zigzagging. Is there anything else we can do? So that's the first question. Really good one from Neil Webster about turning the apps and the app products into nudges, which could create sustainable mode shifts, such as the walking tube map, social prescribing, and healthier routes. How can we get the healthier routes, the less the nicer routes rather than the more direct routes onto the everyday apps that we all use. In my case, City Mapper, Google Maps, and Waze if I'm driving sometimes. So that's that. I don't know whether you have that tech. My understanding is most of the data is open source data anyway. So can you add nudges to your products and also to other things such as social prescribing? And buses, sorry, that was another one from Dave Andy Holiday. I mean, buses, we're lucky to have any rural buses left in this country, because there's unlike London, there's no regulatory, the regime doesn't require a certain service level. So, and the local government funding cuts have meant the subsidies gradually been withdrawn. Except maybe in tourist areas like around St David's in the summer, which has these amazing interlinked buses which are really geared towards walking. But they're the exception to the rule. And I don't know if Selaine's got anything to add on that, because she represents also a rural seaside area. And do you have views about things like structural grass verges instead of edge curbs? And placing of street furniture? So you don't all have to address all of those questions. I'll go Emma, then Hannah, then Dan.
I'll focus on the nudges. I think that's probably where I'm best suited to respond. And I think the work that we're doing at the moment is trying to find out what those nudges are. And I think we're trialing all sorts of different ideas to communicate our routes. We've got a paper map, and that appeals to one sort of audience. Tools like Go Jauntily are definitely for another. We've produced some PDFs of routes that we know that people might want to just print something off and go and follow it, and it lists all the health benefits. And that's something that Islington Council has been interested with us to try out, with a Sport England funded project in Hackney Council, where they're trying to boost activity levels in a housing estate. We're going to be working with Go Jauntily on that, and I think that's going to be quite interesting. They think that's what their local residents will be the useful nudge. And I think there are all sorts of different nudges that we've got. And you're right, getting it onto apps that can promote this is what we need to be doing as well. And I think that's why pushing all this putting this all into one place and trying different things out and seeing what happens is really the next place to go, so we can start to measure impact. But I'll pass over to
Did I say Hannah next? I can't remember. Hannah?
Hi, yeah. I'm the only thing I guess that I've got to add is I feel like some of the things that were suggested, like the walking tube map, they are great nudges. And I think in the last couple of years, we've already started to integrate a lot of that data, just showing people that the greenest route is often almost as quick as the fastest route, is a nudge that we've been working on. And also, one of the things that we try and do at Go Jauntily is make it fun, because walking is actually really good fun. And if you're out and about, you're meeting people, you're seeing nice things, you're popping into coffee shops, just making it more of a kind of everyday adventure. And that's kind of the thing that we think helps promote walking. We came at it from a very much a hypothesis that if people enjoy walking for leisure, they're more likely to walk for active travel. And so we're definitely kind of trying to motivate people with the fear of missing out and the fun and the kind of delight that you get when you're out and about walking.
Dan?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got I think across our network of 8,000 routes, there are about 1,000 that are under 5 kilometres. The average route in England is 12 kilometres, I think close to 15 kilometres in Scotland, which might seem like quite a large distance to a lot of people, but actually that's a typical kind of distance, about 12 kilometres for a recreational walk for many people going out on a walk on a weekend, about 10K, a couple of hours walks, that kind of thing. And in terms of nudge, I guess what we're really focusing on is the power of story and people hearing about other people making different kinds of journeys, that they can see something about themselves and those people or those journeys and think, do you know what, actually I could do that too. And we know people who are walking home from places because they've lost their jobs, because they're at university and they want to have a bit of downtime before they get home to their parents. People who are walking off the trauma of someone dying in their family. And I'm not sure these are necessarily recreational walks. There's a function to them. And then there are other people who equally are walking for a couple of hours to go to the shops as well. I think that hearing that other people are making those kinds of journeys actually can be really transformative in how people see things. Just to push a bit harder on this idea that we're talking about as well in terms of the test bed, actually, I think the Tees Valley or something like that's really interesting, where you have a range of settlements and towns of different sizes that are interconnected, big urban areas as well. And to actually see what works and to provide the evidence, but with the aim of actually then rolling it out across different local authorities and urban areas. But I think what we can see across our 3 projects is how the methodologies we've developed actually work for different cities around the world as well, right? The same technology, the same ideas can work elsewhere. And in terms of the different language around leveling up, whether we're talking about getting more people walking between local places or whether we're talking about global Britain, if you subscribe to the idea of us, whatever that might mean, I think the soft power actually of exporting people being active in a zero carbon, ultra healthy, enjoyable, memorable way is a really positive thing to us all collectively to be thinking about how we can do together.
Thank you very much to all of you for your presentations and your thoughtful answers to the questions. There's one other that's come in, actually, and I've had one on the chat. So, but Dave and Andy Holiday, Dave stroke Andy Holiday has made a really, made some important points about barriers through rail routes, especially if Network Rail does insist on removing the 74 level crossings on the route between King's Cross and Doncaster, and that's one route alone. And I think there are some real issues about rail being a barrier to community walking and cycling and local routes as well. And we've been pushing the government and HS2 on addressing the issues around opportunity, using HS2 as an opportunity and not a barrier to well, an opportunity for new routes, but also not cutting off permanent routes within communities through which the lines go. I've just got one other point from Jack Mayorkas. I think it's an observation, but we'd love to hear more from you, you and others you work with as well, in terms of the amount of data you've got. It's an incredible amount of data. So I hope we hope you're using it to campaign for the changes that you've mentioned, and that you work with us in Parliament and with the government directly, etc., and local authorities, of course, to actually make that. Because I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that, and I think in a funny way, the coronavirus pandemic has shown how many more journeys we could do by walking. Partly the walking, increase in urban walking that some of the low traffic neighbourhoods released, and also and school streets and so on got more people walking for their mental health and for exercise. So I think that we have got a step change towards more walking. We've also got to address the perceived conflict in certain places between walking and cycling stroke e-scooters, because there is no doubt, but judging by our post bags, that is an issue. But I won't waffle anymore because I've got into Selane's time, because Selane is going to conclude this session. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you everyone for this afternoon. I'm so sorry I missed it. My team thoroughly enjoyed it and have sent me some very excellent briefing notes in my absence. So they're already in my inbox. So it sounds like a really great session, and I'm a really passionate walker. You've probably seen my four-legged friend actually join me briefly now that I'm popped back to let him out as well. That he's keeps me very busy walking. But I think as somebody who walks mostly in a rural environment back in Devon compared to walking in an urban environment up here, they're very, very different experiences. And I'm not sure if anyone touched on clearing of footpaths earlier, but certainly we have real issues in Devon where footpaths have become quite overgrown, partly due to, I guess, council funding issues, but also, some of the less well-trodden paths. And certainly for people with, children and even your pets, and I have, trying to get through some of those is a whole new challenge. But as active travel champion for the Conservative Environment Network, as well as co-chairing this, which is walking and cycling and walking, whichever way around, whole conversation continues about how do we create enough space, because again, in our smaller towns like Barnstaple, we really struggle for usage of our pavements, where our certainly I've done a blind walk recently with the dogs, and it's you know, the obstacles that people are falling over, and if you add on to that some e-scooters, a couple of bicycles that are in the wrong place, and some kids having a great time, it is challenging to create enough space. And I very much hope as we move towards net zero and we do decarbonise our transport network, we can work with you and your organisations to create more spaces that we can walk in safely. Thank you again for all of your time and contributions this afternoon, and thank you very much to Ruth for stepping in so that I could stand up and bob up and down for many hours in the chamber. So thank you all so much, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye bye.